And McCabe says, what are you talking about? So Jimmy, you're not telling me that I'm wrong. And Jimmy says, well, I'm not trying to be offensive, but you're wrong. And McCabe said, listen, I knew Ida, I knew this person, I knew Laurel, I knew everybody. And Jimmy very calmly just looked at him and said, well, you know, I lived with him more than most of his wives. God bless both men. The Stan Laurel story is, the Jimmy Murphy story is the only book that's been written that has the complete 1940 tours, 1942 tours. Lois Laurel is in here at the age of 14 in costume when she appeared on stage in Steubenville, Ohio. It's also got a poster that was given to me by a sergeant of a 1942 appearance that has Laurel and Hardy appearing with Gail Storm, Bergen McCarthy. Gail Storm gave an interview for the book. Many people who saw and worked with Laurel and Hardy, including Sid Gould, gave interviews for the book. So if you want to feel what it was like in the dressing rooms, it's Jimmy Murphy's story, but a good portion of it is the Laurel and Hardy tours. And real quick, so I can get off so you guys can do whatever you're doing. The Hollywood Victory Caravan scrapbook. I have a color and a black and white version. It reproduces Bob Hope's actual program, which is the only place I've ever seen, thanks for the memories, signed Stan and Ollie, and it was signed by, or Stan and Dave, it was signed by Oliver. I've never seen Laurel's signature done by Oliver. To me by Lois Laurel. It has the original press book, which only about 120 copies were made, and it also has all of the color footage, which we've shown in a couple of conventions. They're in color frame blow-ups. Obviously, they're not color with the black and white photos, but we've got ticket stubs, name badges in the back, and one of my favorite, sorry to drag, one of my favorite, which just flipped by, and I didn't, oh, Groucho Marx signature to Oliver Hardy. Says, too big, the prettiest Greyhound bus I ever worked with. Signed Groucho. So, like you never get the money back that you put in, or the time, or the effort, but we all do this type of thing to share our collections, I think, and that's the story behind it. I'm available in the dealer's room, as is Bill, and I believe Chuck and Randy will be in the dealer's room, so if anybody gets a chance, just stop by, buy a book, please. Has anybody read the Jimmy Murphy thing? Can I ask you what you thought of it?
First class.
Great. Excellent, thank you. It's all yours, Dave.
Okay, let's do it this way. Let's take one question for each of our guests, and let's begin with a question for Randy, then we'll have a question for Chuck, and so on. So is there a question for Randy Skretvedt?
Why are you?
You Skype a couple months ago to a British tent. I saw this on YouTube.
Oh.
You were telling, I think, a story about one of those crazy sort of script ideas that was never used before. Big noise. Can you tell us about one of them?
Well, yeah, when you get to the Fox films, I mean, sometimes you look at the Fox films and you go, how could these be any worse? And then you read the scripts that Scott Darling came out before, and you go, that's how they could be worse. A lot worse. Some degree of improvisation on the set of the Fox films, because they do deviate quite a bit from the scripts, and thank goodness they do, because I'm not sure now, I think it was Dancing Masters was the one where Laurel and Hardy worked in an airplane factory during the war, and they weren't doing anything funny themselves in the script, but they were leading a squadron of midgets who were supposed to be putting the plane together, and they were supposed to be rolling these midgets into one compartment of the plane so they could assemble part of it, and then they were all going to roll out again. You know, there's really bizarre ideas that Scott Darling had come up with, none of which had anything to do with typical Laurel and Hardy humor. And at USC, they had every script for all of the Fox films, except Bullfighters, unfortunately, which is my favorite of the Fox films. But they would have the initial story idea, the treatment, first draft, final draft, everything. And I read all of those, and yeah, it was kind of depressing reading. And I also saw Stan's personal copies of those Fox scripts, and whenever there was anything that was particularly offensive or not in line with what Laurel and Hardy did. There would be, he'd write with red pen, he'd write squiggles in the margins of the script, as if to say, take this to the producer or director and tell them, we cannot do this. And the more offensive the material was, the bigger the squiggle was in the margin. So I do want people to know, by the way, if they haven't seen this, this is John's project. It just came out, and it's a double CD and book, and the CD is the complete driver's license sketch from Copenhagen. 35 minutes of Laurel and Hardy on stage doing the whole driver's license, and then the two-man version of it, which they did for camp shows. So that's on here as well, plus the Laurel and Hardy 1944 radio pilot in pristine sound from the original discs, and a lengthy interview with Stanton in 1957 from the master tape, and gorgeous photographs that you will never see anywhere else from John's private collection, and just all sorts of great stuff. So do make sure you get this, because it's not a rehash by any means. It's all new, unique material from John's archives, so make sure you get a copy of that.
Thank you, Randy. Do we have a question for Chuck? Yes.
I finally got to see the Larry Semon Wizard of Oz. What the hell was that?
Okay, here comes my diplomacy lesson. Larry Semon made many films, many great films. He made a few that are not great films. Prior to my book, he's known for the worst film he ever made, The Wizard of Oz. In a nutshell, he optioned the property, got cold feet, and turned it basically into a Larry Semon full-length slapstick film. And that's one of the reasons I want to do the book on him, because he is one of the greats, and his films are great. And unfortunately, he's known for that kind of so we shall see, but I will share this, and then I'll move on. I was at an early to bed tent meeting about 8 months ago, and they showed 4 or 5 silent films. Joe Renato was doing his photo maker thing, or that projector he has. And the silent short that got the most laughs was a Larry Semon short. And what was really amazing is it was mostly elderly people, but a few had brought their grandkids who were in their teens or 20s. They roared at Larry Semon, "Dude, he's awesome. Who is that guy?" And I thought, okay, well, the films still stack up. A plea for me, and I'll move on. On my table is flyers asking for anybody who has Larry Semon material. If everyone could at least take one. If you know anybody, have them get in touch. Just trying to do the best book possible. And thank you. The Wizard of Oz. That's good.
Very eloquent. Okay, is there a question for Bill? How about for Vernon Dent? He's not here, but Bill can channel Vernon Dent for you right here.
Do you know if Edgar himself, do you have any anecdotes about working with Laurel and Hardy, the Edgar in the Edgar book? Because he did how many films with Laurel and directed them too as well?
He was in over 500 films.
Yeah.
Edgar Kennedy, according to his daughter, was a very hard-working man his whole life. You know, conceivably in 1942, you might have gone to the movie theater and seen an Edgar Kennedy Average Man two-reeler. You might have seen Edgar Kennedy in a feature, and you might have seen him in a serial, Great Alaskan Mystery. It was very, very prevalent, even in his short life of 58 years old.
And he remade Hats Off. People know that he did a remake of Hats Off?
Yeah, so let me clarify on that. Hats Off, of course, is a lost film by Laurel and Hardy. Edgar was in a remake. Some people call it a remake. It was actually a rehashing of a gag. Hal Yates directed Edgar in his Average Man series in 1942, and they used the same gag pushing the washing machine up the same flight of stairs. So that was a real curio to see, and a lot of scholars are looking to that to see. This is the same director that shot Hats Off at the same location. We're getting to see the whole gag on film, how it was intended for Laurel and Hardy. Well, that's as close as we can get.
What's the remake's title?
What's the remake's title?
It's your move.
It's on a DVD from oldies.com or Alpha Videos. They just came out with volume 3 of the Edgar Kennedy RKO shorts, and It's Your Move is on the new 3rd volume.
Okay, we're running short on time, so we want to get a question for Herb and then one question for whoever you'd like to address it to. So, is there a question for Herb about the Hollywood Victory Caravan, Jimmy Murphy?
They're still
Yes,
reading the
ma'am.
book, Dick.
Herb,
Yes.
I had a member of our tent ask a question about the caravan in terms of promotion. Did Laurel and Hardy do any local radio station?
If you go to the 1940 or the 1942 tour, we found the person who interviewed Laurel and Hardy. They picked Laurel and Hardy up at the airport, and it was a female that did the interview, and she said, I remember picking them up, picked them up at the railroad, sorry. She said both men were tired, both men needed a shave, both men had a cup of coffee, and both men were the most pleasant men that she ever met. When you start to deal with publicity in some of the Victory Caravan cities, Charlie Rogers and Patsy Kelly did drawings of people who are going to be lucky enough to drive Laurel and Hardy and Groucho Marx in the parade. So yeah, there's a lot of publicity, a lot of bond sales going on. So you'll find people incredible. And if you get to the end of the book, you'll see where Laurel and Hardy and the Andrews sisters and Abbott and Costello shared the same stage with Eddie Cantor and Al Jolson doing the moderation. So if that answered your question, I know I got on a tangent.
Okay, we have to make room for the next event, so we're just going to take one more question. And for Chris.
For Richard, because he's been neglected through all this.
Oh, I have nothing to say. I'm just the moderator. I have nothing to say, but go ahead.
Come on, when's that Al Roach biography?
Thank you for coming.
He gets
Okay, one more question.
One more question. Yes, sir.
It's a wonderful opportunity to see the authors of so many great books. My question is, which projects are out there still to be written up? Or anyway.
Oh, that's a tough one. We could talk about that for hours.
I want to do a book about the Laurel Hardy people whom I got to know who were members of Sons of the Desert, talking about other aspects of their careers, because apart from Laurel Hardy, a lot of them had some really interesting careers and have great stories, which I have on tape, and I think maybe that's part of the about that. And I've got 30 hours of tapes to Lucille Hardy Price, and used very little of it, unfortunately, but I still have all the tapes, and I have Dave's scrapbooks, so I think there's another Dave book that will be in the books eventually.
I feel that I have to do my book on Howard. The trouble is, I have so much material and so little time, although I do plan to live as long as Al Roach did, and I do hope to finish that book. And for the last 24 years, I'm lucky enough to be a close friend of Hugh Hefner. We run classic movies at the Playboy Mansion, and I write these screening notes for the films. And when I get time to do the book I want to do with those screening notes, it's going to be called Movies at the Mansion. So those are my retirement.
Those notes are terrific too, because they tell you everything you could possibly think of to ask, and then some about whatever that movie is.
In the words of Hal Roach, he would say, "Thank you, kind sir." That's what he used to say to me when I had done something that he liked. I mean, when I did something that he didn't like, we can't repeat that.
One last shameless plug I forgot to mention. Back in 1982, I did an LP with Marvin Hapley, Long Play Records. Half of it was from his collection of glass base acetate discs or 35mm nitrate film that he got from the studio. So it's background music from Way Out West and Sounds at Sea, and you get to hear Honolulu Baby without the dialogue over it, and all sorts of goodies. That was the first half of the album, and we did some new recordings where you get to hear Marvin playing on any one track. Tuba, drums, piano, celeste, accordion, and singing, because he was really the one-man band, and we had a multi-track recording. So anyway, the LP is now on a CD, and there are Jordan Young's tape in case you're interested in that.
And with that, we have to wrap this up, and I want to thank Randy and Chuck and Bill and Irv and all of you for listening to us. Thank you.
And now everybody over to the author's room.